Creepypasta time. I watched a tape of my 4th birthday. Now my life is starting to crumble. Trauma can be a bitch. That's something I learned quite late, as I'd been living a rather sheltered life. My home is a tiny town in the middle of nowhere, which admittedly can sound boring or even suffocating to some. Though to me it was the perfect paradise. I grew up in a home filled with love and affection on a street with a dozen more similar houses. All beautiful on the outside with bright green lawns and whimsical mailboxes. I lived alone with my mom and my dad, but that was perfectly fine because our neighbors had children as well. We had everything you could ever wish for. All the best toys that they showed in ads on TV. I was one of the first kids who had a Nintendo and later on a PlayStation. My friends and I had a treehouse where we spent all our free time reading comic books and novels. We were fairly normal in all the typical ways. Those children had always been my very best friends, and one of them even became my girlfriend and very soon in the future hopefully my wife. Mabel and I moved out of our childhood homes 2 weeks ago and into our own little dream house not far from our parents. I realize most adults want to leave at a certain point to find their own future, but we'd always known that ours was right here. In Appleton. A place where you know all of your neighbors and never feel out of place. Most people I know never left. No, that's not perfectly true. Nobody I know has. I never wanted to either, and I never questioned my life. I never had a reason to. Questions are not necessary when everything is clear. And I swear it was for the longest time, until I found the tapes. And you see, that's the thing with critical thinking. You are fine and well without it, but then you start asking one question and then there's no going back. If you choose to be skeptical, well, it will make you go crazy. And I had opened the door for it. I asked enough questions to find out a terrible truth about myself. Like most children born in the middle of the 90s, I had most of my life recorded on tape after Mom and Dad bought a video recorder when I was 3 or 4 years old. My parents filmed school graduations, football matches, picnics, and of course every birthday. I remember we used to watch the tapes quite regularly when I was younger. Sometimes I'm not even sure if the memories I have of my childhood stem from those films or my brain. But then one day our VHS recorder broke down. We hadn't switched from tapes to DVDs and over the years kind of forgot those tapes in their dusty boxes in the basement. When I found the old VHS recorder with Mabel's stuff, I was ecstatic. I hadn't thought about my childhood films in quite a while, but now I could not wait to watch them. I walked the 5 minutes to my parents right away. They both weren't home, but I still had my key and went to pick up the boxes from the basement. I looked through the tapes, which all had different things written on them, and picked the one that said Jamie 99X. I shoved in the tape, and after rewinding for a little while, I pressed play. The first video was of my 4th birthday. I saw Mom and Dad dressed in bright sweaters and high-waisted jeans. They were smiling and laughing while Dad was lighting the candles on my cake. My friends and I were sitting around the table impatiently waiting for the cake. There were some other neighbors as well. I guess one of them was filming. The thing that stood out to me though was this one boy. He looked a little older than me, but I'd never seen him before in my life. He had dark hair and very fair skin. His arm was around my shoulder and he was pointing at the candles on the cake. It seemed normal and fine at first, but then the boy looked into the camera. He started staring and didn't stop. His gaze became uncomfortable and strange until it changed the whole atmosphere of the tape. The camera person started zooming in on my face so he wouldn't be in the picture anymore. It felt so odd to me because I'd never met a real stranger. Everyone here knows everyone after all. I recognized the tiny versions of my other friends, but not him. So who did this boy grow up to be? I continued watching my 5th birthday. This time it was a garden party with the same people, including the boy. Again, he was plastered to me. It seemed like we were very close. But while everyone was laughing and being cheerful, his face looked anxious. When the camera came close to him, he'd start staring again. I took a picture of it on my phone so I could zoom in closer, but I simply wasn't able to recognize who he was. I went on with the following birthdays and they were the same. Only on the 7th one I finally started noticing a clue as to who this boy might be. When everyone started singing happy birthday to me, the strange boy again stared at the camera and mouthed something. I rewind to that exact moment again and again. It felt critical to me to figure out what he was saying. I can't quite explain why, but something about him was pulling me in. I turned up the volume as high as I could. Happy Birthday was blasting through my home. And when everyone was singing Happy Birthday Dear Jamie, I believe I heard what the strange boy was singing instead. Luca. I played the scene a few more times until I was sure. He was singing for Luca. What is this noise? I heard Mabel shout as he shut the door behind her. I quickly turned down the volume. Sorry, love, I laughed. I found these old tapes and got a little carried away. Mabel came closer and sat down right next to me. No way. Look how little you are. She started laughing. Yeah, and there's you. Your hair was still blonde then. As we continued watching the tape, it suddenly went to my 8th birthday. He's gone. I whispered. Mabel looked at me with a confused look. I went back to the moments that showed the little boy. This boy. He was at all my other birthdays. Do you know who he is? Mabel shook her head. Probably someone's cousin. She smiled. I'm gonna get some water, do you want anything? I shook my head, unable to keep my eyes from the screen. After a while, I don't remember how much time had passed, I heard a familiar voice behind me. It's not nice to take something without asking. I turned around to the strangely uncomfortable face of my mother. My dad was right next to her with frowned brows. We watched these films when we needed to. You don't need them anymore now, do you? My father asked. Mabel was standing behind them with the same smile she had when she left to go to the kitchen earlier. I guess it was an excuse to call my parents, though I didn't understand what suddenly had happened. Yeah, sorry I guess. Just wanted to check out my eyes went back to the screen. Why did I feel so mesmerized by it? Well then, sweet boy. If you insist on rewatching the past, at least pick a more stimulating film. Film? I asked. My mother started rummaging through the tapes and finally chose one she felt comfortable with. Jamie's Happy Times 2004 to 2008. It was a recording of my parents and me as we went to a park nearby. We were feeding ducks and later on, other children joined us. All my friends were there, including my girlfriend. In the back of my mind, I was still thinking of Lucas, but the nostalgia suddenly took over. It had been a happy time back then. It still was a happy time. The four of us continued watching the tape, which showed different moments of my life. Most of them together with friends and family. Only Mabel started disappearing in the later parts of the video. Weird. I could swear you were there all the time when everyone else was, I whispered towards her. I have my own life and family too, you silly goose. I can't be everywhere at once, now can I? She said without looking away from the screen. I finally looked away from the tape. Mabel was acting particularly odd that day. But your parents are right there, I said. She didn't respond to that. Oh well, it has gotten awfully late, hasn't it? You had your fun, Jamie. I believe it is time you get back to reality, my mother instructed as she turned off the tape. My father started collecting all the other ones and they walked towards the door. Can't we keep them here? You don't have a VHS anyway, I said. Dad looked at me with a strict but friendly face. Well, alright boy. But do not spend all night looking at the past. You need to focus on your future too. My mom kissed me on the cheek. She always does that, but I could swear this time her lips stayed on my cheek longer than usual. When I went back to look through the tapes again, I noticed Dad had left all except for the birthday tape. The following day, the thought of that strange boy in the evening with my parents and Mabel didn't let go of me. When I woke up, Mabel was in the kitchen making coffee. Oh, good morning, sweetheart. Did you have some nice dreams? She smiled from ear to ear. Mabel, who is Luca? I asked directly. For a second, her smile disappeared. She let the coffee spoon fall to the ground. I never heard that name in my life. Is that a boy or a girl? She asked as she had collected herself again. However, she didn't even wait for my response. The boy in the tape. You said he might be someone's cousin. Mabel tilted her head like she didn't know what I was talking about. I only know the cousin of Jessica Blitz. His name is Eli. I fucking know Eli. I'm talking about the boy in that tape, I said in a raised voice, which I regretted shortly after. Mabel looked scared. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get loud. That's fine, love. It's just that I don't know what you're talking about. We didn't watch any birthday tapes. I sat down by the kitchen table. Are you okay? Mabel asked in a concerned tone. I didn't respond. Do you want me to call your parents and ask if they have any tapes of your birthdays? Mabel called my parents and put them on speakerphone. Not only did they agree that we never watched any tapes of my birthdays, but my father also said the only tapes we have of my birthday parties start somewhere around 2005. They lost the other one ages ago. I almost believed them. I really did. They spoke in such a kind and loving manner, that it wouldn't have occurred to me that they would ever lie. Except, I still had a picture of that boy on my phone. A photo of him sitting right next to me with a cake in front of us. A cake with 6 candles. I didn't trust either Mabel or my parents with the question, and so I started asking other friends. The ones that were at the parties as well. None of them remembered the boy. If he was someone's friend or cousin, then someone would have remembered him, right? I decided to visit my parents and ask them directly about what was going on. This time with the proof of the photo. I knocked on the door and Mom opened it. She smiled, but in the corner of her eye, I believe I saw a tear. "Everything all right, Mom? Can I come in?" I asked. "But of course you can. You're always welcome here." She called out enthusiastically but shook her head at the same time. For a moment I hesitated. Something seemed wrong, but before I could take a step back, my father appeared behind the door. "Jamie. Come in, boy. We need to talk to you about something." I followed my parents to the living room where they were sitting with Mabel and Frank, one of my friends. They were both smiling, but their eyes looked sad. "What's going on?" I asked. "Sit down, sweetheart," my mother instructed. "Look, honey. We haven't been honest with you. Not because we want to hurt you, quite the opposite," Mabel said. "I told your parents about the picture." "About Luca," Frank chimed in. My father sat down next to me. "We wanted to keep this from you to spare your poor soul. The boy was a friend of yours. Your best friend even, but I'm not sure how to say this, so I will just try to be blunt. He died. And the death was partially your fault." "What?" My mom sat down as well and started stroking my hair. "You didn't mean to. You went swimming in the lake and then you pushed him. It was only supposed to be a joke, but he never came back up." I stayed still. I heard the words, but they made no sense. I didn't have a single memory of that. Sometimes your brain makes you forget something that traumatic. "Just know that we don't blame you." "Who are his parents?" I asked. My parents exchanged a look. Nobody said a word at first. Then, at the same time, Mabel and my father started speaking. "They moved away. They live down the road." "Down the road? Are you stupid?" my father hissed. "We could have asked someone." "You screwed it up," she shouted back. I got up from my seat. "What's going on?" Now they were all looking at me. "Frank. You can go. Get everyone else. I suppose it's time." "Time for what?" My best friend got up and walked outside. Dad grabbed my wrist tightly. "Your mother thought you were doing so perfectly well that we could keep you the way you were, but I told her you were still human. And they always mess it up eventually," my father said. "You see, boy. We came to this place a long time ago, hoping to learn how the world works so we could have our version of it. We built up Appleton ourselves, but we needed something special. Children. We needed to learn how they grow up so we could make our own little versions. You did so well, and many other children did. But we made some mistakes. Some of the children we collected were too old already. They remembered their real parents. At least partially. But we have improved. Just look at you. You are a perfect example. You have ripened just as we needed you to." He kept speaking, but the words made no sense to me. Until I remembered that the tapes started in 1999. 4 years after I was born. Of course, children that young don't remember anything, but the rest of my childhood was blurry as well. "Who is the boy?" Dad shrugged. "We found him in the playground with you." "Are you even the same girl as the one on those tapes?" I shouted at Mabel. My entire existence was falling apart in front of me. Mabel shrugged. "Does it matter if I am perfectly correct? I mean, imagine you were a copy. Would it really matter?" "I don't think it would. I feel fine." "No, actually, I feel great." "Do you want to feel great as well, Jamie?" my mother asked. It was the first thing she said. She didn't wait for my response. Instead, she grabbed my hand. "Welcome the others. I will prepare him outside." She continued to pull me towards the garden. I wondered if I should fight her, but I wasn't even sure where I would go. Dad and Mabel were inside, and Frank was probably on his way with all the neighbors. I was alone in the garden with the woman I thought of like my mother. Though in reality, she was my kidnapper. "I never killed that boy, did I?" I asked, clenching my fist so I would shake less. She shook her head. "You shouldn't have started asking questions. They were accepting you." A tear rolled down her face. She went through her pocket and I thought she was going to cut me or do hell knows what. But instead, she gave me a key as she guided me towards the garage. "Take it and drive. As far as the gas will take you. Never come back." My hands were trembling. "Mom, what is going on?" "Martin, that's where we found you, Luke," as she looked towards the house with fear in her eyes. "Now, go. They will be here soon, and if they get their hands on you, it won't be pretty." In the matter of a day, my entire life had fallen apart. Everything I believed in was a lie. The years with my girlfriend. My entire childhood. I had been living in something so right, I should have known it was wrong. I drove as far as I could. Of course, nobody believed a word of what I was saying at first, but in that town called Martin I found help. They say I made up this tale as a response to an incredibly traumatic event, but I know that's not true. I've been looking for Appleton ever since. Those creatures probably never stopped collecting their special children. There is no map with the small town of Appleton on it, no proof of its existence online. I don't know what to do next. All I have left of that place is the photo I took of the boy who tried to warn me. And I truly hope he managed to escape back then.